Hey guys, I'm Tom, a Tech Chap, and there's never been a better time, or should I say a more confusing time, to buy a new iPad. So I've spent the last couple of weeks testing every single iPad you can buy from Apple right now, starting from just £329 all the way up to a wallet-busting £1,419. So this is my guide to all the things you need to know when choosing a new iPad. And I'll also be doing a quick review of the accessories. We've got a couple of the Magic keyboards here, and also the 2 generations of Apple Pencil, including the first gen one, which is probably the worst design thing in the history of the world. You know, you've seen this before, but yeah, come on, not ideal. So as of right now, there are 4 main models of iPad that Apple sells. So we've got the new budget-friendly iPad 8th generation 10.2. This just came out along with a new version of the iPad Air. This is the 10.9 4th gen iPad Air, which is basically a slightly cut down iPad Pro, of which we've got the 11 and 13-inch models here. And finally, we've got the iPad Mini 5, which people seem to either love or think is just a little bit pointless, given the size of a lot of phones these days, including the iPhone 12 Pro Max I've got here, which you can see I'm using as a bit of a viewfinder for this vertical camera. So I think that's enough preamble. Let's actually get into it and see which iPad is best for you. So let's start with the cheapest one, which is just called the iPad. Well, technically iPad 8th generation, but they just call it the iPad, and we get a 10.2-inch screen, and it starts from just £329, same in dollars. This has only just been refreshed in late 2020, and while the design hasn't really changed at all, you can see we still have a Touch ID button, these fairly thick bezels. You can see here from this little black bar, this is the LTE model. The important changes are on the inside, and we now get the much more powerful Apple A12 Bionic processor, which we also get in the iPad Mini 5. So I think this guy is a good choice if you're a more casual user. Nothing wrong with that. You know, if you're just watching Netflix, browsing the web, maybe doing a bit of light gaming. But if you do want to do some work or maybe write some emails, then you can still connect it to the smart keyboard. So it just pops on like that. Then I always forget how this goes. Yep, like that. So you don't have to pay a ton of money to get an iPad Pro with a Magic keyboard to get a decent basic work tablet, I was going to say laptop, but tablet/laptop thing. And even though this guy is the cheapest, every app or game I threw at it ran flawlessly. The A12 is a seriously impressive chip, and while it's not quite as fast as what you get on the Airs and the Pros, in reality you just don't really notice that much. And while the 10.2-inch Retina IPS screen looks good, it's sharp, bright, colorful, and it's got really good view angles, it is a little bit outclassed by the pricier options here. One more thing about the base iPad, and that unlike all the other iPads here, the 10.2 actually doesn't get a laminated screen. There's a slight air gap between the glass and the actual screen, which means you don't quite feel like you're touching the screen itself. Although it's pretty subtle and most people won't notice, but it takes away just a little bit from the premium experience. So the main problem, I think, with the standard iPad, and this goes for the Mini 5 as well, is while build quality is top-notch, they do feel just a little bit last gen, especially compared to the iPad Air and Pros. As I say, the screen bezels are pretty chunky, and the design itself hasn't really changed in the best part of like 6 or 7 years. And also we have lightning charging here, unlike the USB-C that we get on the Air and the Pro, which I think is just a little bit more helpful in real life, as most phones these days, except for the iPhones, of course, use USB-C as well. And also, if you are one of those people, you know who you are, who use their iPad to take photos, and you know what, fair enough, before I used to be a bit like, just use your phone, but a lot of people like to take their photos on here and then view them back on here as well. It's just like an all-in-one device. So if the camera is important to you, this is an area where the Mini and the standard iPad fall behind a bit. We do get an 8 megapixel rear camera and a 1 megapixel selfie, and they're usable in good light, but the quality isn't that good. I think even the entry-level model, the £329 version, which has 32 gigs of storage, well, isn't a lot at all. If you're just a basic casual user, then I think for that, this is an absolute bargain. But of course, Apple are the masters of the upsell, and I think storage is my biggest issue with this. I mean, I don't want to get too nerdy and boring and stuff, but the actual usable storage you have on this guy with the 32 gig model is actually just 21 to 22 gigabytes. So not exactly a whole lot of room for games or movies, but just something to bear in mind if you are going to use this for a few years. storage could be an issue. Now I will say it's good to see that we have at least some Apple Pencil support on the base iPad, so if you are into your drawing or doodling or just browsing with a pencil, then you can invest in one of these and it kind of opens up a whole new way of using your iPad. Problem is, it's the first generation Apple Pencil, which means you have to charge it through the Lightning connector, which means you end up with a very delicate ice cream style thing going on. Not ideal at all, but if you think it's worthwhile and you might get some use out of doodling or drawing, then at least you can use the Apple Pencil with the base iPad. So I think that's plenty on the standard iPad. So let's move on to the iPad that I think I'm personally most excited about, and that's the iPad Air 4th generation, which comes in a new blue color, which I think looks great, and it's just kind of like the best overall iPad in my opinion. And what I like about this is it's much more of a slightly cut down iPad Pro than a slight upgrade to the standard iPad. The Air inherits the Pro's design and also a liquid retina screen, although it is capped at 60 Hz rather than the 120 on the Pro. We don't get the Pro's Face ID tech on here either, instead the Touch ID button is now built into the power button at the top. And this also gets Apple's laminated liquid retina display with True Tone, which actually alters the white balance of the screen to match the lighting around you. Plus it supports the wider P3 color gamut. Basically, it's a much higher quality, more accurate screen. But it's not just a pretty face, because also on the inside we have Apple's brand new A14 Bionic chip, which in some tests is actually faster than the beefier A12Z processor that we get in the two iPad Pros, although it kind of comes down to what apps you're using. If we look at some benchmarks, it's no surprise really that the A12 Bionic in the standard iPad and the Mini get similar results, but it's the A14 in the Air that really impresses, and is around 50% faster on average across single-core and multi-core speeds. Really, these are all top-tier mobile chips, which will easily handle anything you throw at them, even 4K video editing, so likely as much you won't notice any difference with day-to-day use between them. The base spec also gets 64 gigs of storage, which I still think is pretty stingy, especially for the price, and I think is really my only complaint here. The other big upgrade with the Air over the standard iPad is in the camera department, and actually this shares the same 12 megapixel main camera and 7 megapixel selfie camera that you get on the iPad Pros. So while the Air does cost a fair bit more than the base iPad, we're looking at about £250 more than this guy, the more up-to-date design, features, much better performance, I think makes this the best choice of iPad for most people if your budget can stretch to it. Now, it's probably no surprise at all that my favorite accessory for the Air and also for the Pros is the Magic Keyboard. It is pretty expensive, but it just transforms the way you can use your iPad. I love this thing. And I think for me, the fact that it is just magnetically attached, so you can take it off whenever you want, so you don't always have it in like a folio cover and then you never actually use it like a proper tablet. And also the fact that you get a proper touchpad just makes this more of a laptop experience than ever before. And also a separate USB Type-C port, so you can charge the iPad with one of them and then maybe connect peripherals with the other. So I've got the Air here, but if I also bring out the Magic Keyboard with the 13-inch one for the iPad Pro, interestingly, the keyboard experience isn't that much different despite the size difference between these two models. The keys are actually the same size, they've just kind of reduced the space between them a little bit, and some of the special character keys have been narrowed a little bit, and also we've got less room at the top here, but in terms of a typing experience and also the trackpad, they're very, very similar. And so I think if you do want to have a kind of laptop experience with your tablet or get some actual proper work done, then I think the Air with a Magic Keyboard is the best combination. And I almost forgot that actually the iPad Air also supports the second generation iPad Pencil, Apple Pencil, same thing I guess, which not only has a lower response time, so it's a little bit nicer to use, but most importantly, the integration with the iPad is so much better. It just magnetically connects, so you can store it there, it doesn't come off at all. Unless you really shake it, but don't do that. But it also wirelessly charges that way as well. So it's just always top, always there. Such a better design than the first generation. Now versus the Air, the two iPad Pro models add a slightly faster 120 Hz ProMotion display, so they do feel quite a bit smoother. Size-wise, these two are near enough identical actually, and also in terms of just overall build quality and design, there really isn't much in it at all. The Pro is a tiny bit thinner, but more importantly, we have the option of this much bigger 12.9-inch iPad Pro, which, as I say, combined with the Magic Keyboard, is actually lighter than the MacBook Air. And also the price is pretty comparable with a MacBook Air. And although I would argue that this still is not a full laptop replacement, even with the accessories, it is closer than it's ever been before. And depending on how you use it and what apps you use, potentially it could replace your laptop, although probably not for me. But apart from their size, both Pro models are basically identical. Now, in terms of performance, it's kind of interesting because in the iPad Pros, we get the A12Z or A12Z for my American friends, which is basically just a beefed up A12. So the A14 in the Air actually has fewer cores than the A12Z in the Pros, but in single core performance, this is actually 42% faster than these guys. And while multi-core and compute performance is similar, actually the A12Z or Z in the Pros comes out to be about 47% faster in graphics benchmarks. What you will notice though is the 120Hz refresh rate, which is better for drawing as inputs feel more immediate, and just browsing and navigating the home screen, opening apps, all feel a lot quicker. I wouldn't say it's a huge deal, but going back to a regular 60Hz screen does feel a bit slow. As for the camera, we have the main lens, which is near enough the same as the normal Air, but we also get the ultra-wide so you can pinch out and you have a lot more in the frame. We also get the LiDAR scanner, which can help give you more accurate measurements. It comes in handy if you do much augmented reality stuff, but I don't think it's really a must-have feature for most people. Now, you thought I forgot about this one, but last but by no means least, we have the iPad Mini 5. But I really do think this has kind of been overshadowed by the new, cheaper and faster standard iPad, the 10.2. Although to its credit, the Mini does have a laminated screen, so it sits right on the edge, which is what you want. And also we do get True Tone on this, which we don't on the standard iPad. I know a lot of people do love the Mini, but it doesn't have the newer Air's design, there's no official keyboard support, and also I think these days with phones getting bigger and bigger, there's just less of a need for a 7.9-inch 4x3 screen on an iPad like this. But I guess if you want your iPad for maybe a bit of ebook reading, it's a good sort of Kindle size, and just portability is really important to you, then yeah, it's still definitely worth considering. All right, so I think that's enough of me waffling on. Let's wrap this up. And I think for me, the best iPad you can go for, especially if you play some games, is the iPad Air 4th Gen. The £579 64GB version is great, it's the one I go for. I think the Pro is only really worthwhile if you think you're gonna get some use out of that ultra-wide camera, or you can't live without a 120Hz screen these days. But aside from that, not really that useful. Although, as I say, that 13-inch, well, 12.9 is a beautiful thing to behold in person. I also think most of you should probably avoid going for the cellular version. I'm just not really sure why you'd want a more expensive iPad with an LTE option when you could probably just hotspot from your phone. But what about you guys? Which iPad would you go for, or none of the above, and maybe go for an Android tablet or something? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more from me, don't forget to hit that little subscribe button below. I've got loads more buying guides coming soon, and I will catch you next time right here on the Tech Chat.